All right, everybody, I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, I'm going to be reviewing, well, I'm not going to be reviewing, I'm going to be showing you my entire Jon Krakauer nonfiction book collection because Jon Krakauer is my favorite nonfiction writer of all time. I just love his stuff. And that's why I wore my John Bovey shirt, because Jon Krakauer and John Bovey spell John Jon. Makes sense to me. So, my first introduction to Jon Krakauer was on David Letterman. David Letterman had Jon Krakauer on his show talking about the disastrous events that happened in 1996 on Mount Everest when a bunch of people climbing the mountain died. And Jon Krakauer happened to be a journalist on that very trip. And he wrote the book Into Thin Air about that very thing. And so after I watched the Letterman show the next day, I went and got a copy of Into Thin Air. I sat on my porch one night at about 10 o'clock, stars overhead, nice summer night porch. I thought I would read a couple pages, get started. 4 a.m., I was still reading this book on a porch. I was riveted, absolutely riveted and terrified. Now, if you want to see my full review of Into Thin Air, all you need to do is type in Durfee and Into Thin Air and into your YouTube bar search place, and the review I did will magically appear on your screen. So do that if you want to see my more detailed review of this book. So far, it's the only Jon Krakauer book I have reviewed on the channel. Now, I did get to meet Jon Krakauer. You know I always show off my signed books if I've gotten them signed. And he did sign this one to me. You can see it's a very small signature. And I've got one other one signed here too. But so, if you want to read the most engrossing real-life adventure story that will just keep you up at night sweating, horrified, Into Thin Air is in my top 3 favorite. I can't remember if it was my top 3 or top 5. It's at least my top 5 favorite nonfiction books of all time. It is just so amazing and so well written, and you feel as if you were right there on Everest in the freezing cold, watching people just die next to you, die over here, die over there, and all those bodies are still up there. I mean, they don't recover dead bodies; they just leave them along the trail. Anyway, great book. The second book I ever read by Jon Krakauer was many years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later. He came out with Under the Banner of Heaven, which I wasn't expecting. This is a story set in Utah. I live in Utah. Set amongst the polygamous Mormons. I live down in southern Utah, down where this takes place in polygamous communities. And it's about 2 killers, Ron and Dan Lafferty, who wanted to become polygamists. They were regular Mormons. They wanted to become polygamist Mormons. They were trying to talk their third brother, into doing it, and his wife, but they said no. And so, in their religious fervor, they murdered his wife, who said no, and a little baby. And it's right there in the opening prologue, the whole murder scene. And it is graphic, violent, terrifying, horrifying, disgusting, and grotesque, and all of those things. And then we get into the Banner of Heaven and how religion can just warp people's minds to the point where they're justified in committing murder. That's the main theme of this, and he uses the Mormon Church as his launching point into this theme, and especially the murder of this woman and her baby. And not only that, it goes into a lot of Mormon history, a lot of history of a lot of religions, and it pretty much, it's an expose on how cults and religion now are just bad overall. Now, I grew up Mormon. I spent 2 years as a Mormon missionary. I've spent 4 years at Brigham Young University getting a degree. I am no longer Mormon. Um, but I'm still fascinated by everything religious. I'm still fascinated at why people believe in religion. And I love books like this that examine that theme and that look at it with a very critical eye and are pretty harsh about it. A lot of you might not like that, especially if you're Mormon. Mormons hate this book. I think it's fucking brilliant. Not only that, but he signed this one to me also. When I met him, the only books I owned of his were this one and Into Thin Air. Now, another little tidbit that I should tell you about this book is Ron and Dan Lafferty, the murderers that are central to this book. I work at the Utah State Prison. I've met both of them. I will not say much about either one, just for their own personal confidentiality and things like that. But I have worked closely with both in the prison. And so that's interesting to see. And one of them back when I ran the prison libraries, one of them would frequent the library quite a bit. And we did have a lot of copies of this. And I jokingly once said, "Hey, how come you've never autographed any of your books?" He picked one up, took a big black magic marker and autographed it. I was like, "Oh, you're going to get me fired." I was joking. Anyway. Great book, great book. Now my third introduction, the third books after I read these two and met Jon Krakauer and got them signed, I was really interested in anything else he had, but really about all he had was Into the Wild, which was his first book, his breakout hit, and this was about the kid that went up into the Alaskan wilderness by himself, thinking that he would survive off the land. Not only did I grow up in southern Utah, but I spent a lot of years growing up in Fairbanks, Alaska. And even I know, you just don't wander off into the Alaskan wilderness thinking you're going to survive. The Alaskan wilderness is unlike any other wilderness on the world. It will chew you up and spit you out, freeze you to death, drown you, kill you. All the creatures out there will eat you. And everything that you eat will poison you. It's worse than the Australian outback. A lot worse. And you just don't go into it. But, this kid, he did McCandless. His name was Chris McCandless. He went out there. They found him in this old bus south of Fairbanks. And I kind of know the geography of that area. And you can get hella lost out there. The fourth book I bought and read by Jon Krakauer was Where Men Win Glory. This is the Odyssey of Pat Tillman, the star Arizona, he played for both Arizona college team and the Arizona Cardinals of the pro team. So he was a star athlete in Arizona. After 9/11 happened, he was on the Arizona Cardinals team, one of the star players. After 9/11, he's like, "I don't want to be a football player. I want to be an Army Ranger and fight for our freedoms over in Iraq and Afghanistan." That's what he did. He followed his convictions. He joined the Army Rangers, became one of the elite Army Rangers, and was subsequently killed in Afghanistan. And this book goes into, it's a biography of his life and the events leading up to his death. Very, very good. Very, very, a good look at another guy who, I think one of the reasons Jon Krakauer picked the Pat Tillman stories because Pat Tillman was not a religious guy. He was an atheist. And he didn't go to fight in Iraq over some sort of Christian religious fervor to, punish the other religion. He went over there as an atheist, just knowing that we got to stamp out evil in the world wherever we can find it. And he felt that those regimes over in those parts of the world were evil, and he wanted to do his part for the country he loved. Even in his death, which is mentioned in here, at his funeral, John McCain, not knowing how much of an atheist Pat Tillman was, gave a very religious eulogy. And right after that, Pat Tillman's brother stood up and said, "Well, with all due respect, Mr. McCain, my brother didn't believe in any of that bullshit you're just talking about." I thought it was one of the great, great, great moments in I don't know what, political history? military history, U.S. history. I just thought it was cool that his brother was like, my brother didn't believe in any of that religious garbage you're talking about. Anyway, it's mentioned in here. I should also mention that Pat Tillman was killed by friendly fire, and there was a military cover-up about that, which has gone into detail. Just such a riveting book about a great hero that we should all look up to, Pat Tillman. Then the most recent Jon Krakauer book is called Missoula, and it is Rape and Justice. It's about rape and injustice surrounding rape, especially when the rapists are famous, especially when the rapists all belong to the same Missoula, Montana college football team. So this is set in Missoula, Montana, as the title would give away. And it's about a series of serial rapes that were happening on campus that the upper echelon of the administration of the college just was sweeping under the rug, because all of the people that were being pinpointed as the rapists were on a football team and blah, 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 the rest. A great expose into how a lot of colleges, and when I was at Yale University, I did not go to Yale, but when I was a Mormon missionary, they posted me on campus in Yale to teach Yale students about Mormonism. But even back then, Yale was having a problem with this. Women being raped on campus by well-known and well-connected young men that were Yale students, and Yale was sweeping that under the rug. And I remember a big demonstration they had in the big chapel square right next to Yale in New Haven, where they just had thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of women, and this protest against what Yale was doing. And it really left an impression on me. And so when I read Missoula, I saw a lot of similarities there between my own firsthand accounts of what happened at Yale and the stuff that was going on in Missoula, where I actually like lockstep. How many? That's only 5 books. My entire Jon Krakauer collection is only 5 books. But they're 5 brilliant pieces of art and writing and information. And you should get each one of them because they're super good. Now, I have left a detailed review of this one. I will be rereading all of them eventually and leaving a review on the channel. But I just wanted to share with you my Jon Krakauer book collection.